So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Total Drama. So let's start the series. I'm Chris McLean, and as you can see, things have changed since we've been away. We've been to the movies, we've been around the world, but this season we're going right back where it all started, at Camp Wawanakwa. Chris said, pointing to the camp sign that had fallen apart in a heap and appeared to have been unfixed for years. Chris took a drink from a respectable-looking intern and stated, by change, I mean it got really dangerous here, just before a giant octopus arm emerged from the sea and shattered the dock, drowning the intern and barely slightly wetting Chris. Before the boat totally missed them, Chris waved to the final season contestants, saying, but the rules of the game remain the same. A handful of unsuspecting teens will bunk with complete strangers, airing their dirty laundry in our outhouse confessional. They will also compete in life-threatening challenges all over the island. If they fail, they risk being voted off. They don't come back ever. Last person standing wins $1 million. Speaking of our cast, here they come now. No, not them. Due to some stuff in the legal department, we are forced to give the cast of seasons 1 to 3 a break, with them finally being able to relax at Playa de Losers, all expense paid, especially with Courtney's lawyers breathing down my neck. So for this season, we got all new players fighting for the million. And here they come now for real this time. Chris stated that they would arrive. Here we have all 20 contestants. That's right, we have 20. We were supposed to only have 13 to 14, but the producers agreed that it was too short. Chris continued to identify each individual on the vessel. As the first camper stepped off the boat, Chris exclaimed, "Meet Joe." She wore blue sweatpants and a dark gray sweatshirt, and her short dark blonde hair and blue eyes made it difficult to see her form, yet if you peered closely, you could see a small portion of her bust. Joe arched an eyebrow at it, and Chris smirked and asked, "So what do you think of the island?" Chris laughed before the next camper left the boat, and Joe grinned and said, "It's a dump, but if I really have to stay here then no matter, since I'm going to win this game." Chris remarked, "Nice to meet you, Scott." He was dressed simply in a filthy tank top and saggy blue pants, and his orange hair was greasy back. Scott, who had been confined to a chatty camper for nearly the whole boat voyage, rubbed his temples and remarked, "Yeah, whatever, just get me off this damn boat, and could someone please give me some aspirin for this splitting headache?" After saying, "Zoe and Mike, welcome to the game." As the two campers got off the pier, Chris simply brushed it off and went on to the next group of campers who had fallen off the boat together. Mike, who wore a teal shirt and light blue pants, had tan skin, brown hair that was spiked up in the front, and brown eyes. He appeared a little anxious and unkempt as he peered around, seemingly searching for someone or something. Zoe, on the other hand, was almost naturally beautiful because she didn't wear makeup. She had bright red hair in 2 pigtails with a pink flower clipped in it, and her light brown eyes. Her figure also contributed to her natural beauty, as her red strapless shirt, which almost looked like a corset, seemed to almost burst out of her bust, and her pants seemed to be slightly stretched to fit her rather large rear. Zoe smiled and added, "Thanks for having me on. Hopefully everyone else is friendly," as she hopped a little, inadvertently causing her chest to bounce a little. Before they went to where the other competitors were, Mike chuckled uncomfortably and remarked, "Yeah, glad to be here." Chris exclaimed, "Next we have is Lightning," as a boy leaped from the boat and cried out in triumph. Before Chris could get a good look at him, he flexed his muscles and kissed his biceps, shouting, "Shabam! Lightning is here to win this game." Wearing a blue football jersey with a bright yellow one on the front and dark gray cargo shorts, Lightning had dark brown skin and short, darker brown hair. Chris moved the jock away from the camera because he was wasting his time, saying, "Well, go join the others and wait until we are done." A boy with black hair and a military buzz cut, dressed in a dark green shirt and jeans shorts, saluted Chris as he stepped off the boat. "And now we have Cadet Brick," Chris stated. Chris arched his eyebrow at Brick, who exclaimed, "Sir. I am glad to be on the show, sir." Before Brick strode off in the direction of the others, Chris asked uncertainly, "You're relieved?" Chris wondered if he should keep him away from Chef because he knew that Chef had been honorably retired from the army, but he wasn't sure how that would impact this particular contestant. Shaking off the odd cadet, Chris added, "And here comes B and Dawn," as he watched the big guy exit the boat. He was as large as the former camper Owen, had dark complexion, and was dressed in a dull red sweatshirt, blue shorts, and a black jacket. His brown hair was tucked away under a red cap that was turned back, and his eyes were dulled as though he didn't want to be here. "Wait, where is Dawn?" Chris questioned, inadvertently interrupting B as he glanced around for Dawn, who had been standing close to B just a moment before nearly vanishing. As Chris startled and surprised to see Dawn standing just next him, a quiet voice said, "I'm right here." Dawn was relatively short, with long, light blonde hair and teal eyes that gazed at him. She was dressed in a black skirt, indigo stockings, and a dark green sweater with a teal shirt collar peeking out. Her skin tone was fairly pale, and her height made her physique little. Dawn gave him a perplexed look as he inquired, "How did you get there?" Dawn asked, "What do you mean?" "I've been here after I walked off with B," and Chris waved her away with a shudder. Chris stammered, "Jay, just go stand with the other campers," but when he turned to look, Dawn was already standing beside him. Still in a panic, he exclaimed, Let's move on to Dakota," before grinning broadly and gesturing to the next competitor. Dakota grinned as she removed her orange-shaded glasses to show off her green eyes and said, "Hello everyone. Nice to meet you." With her long, nearly golden blonde hair, Dakota wore a tight-fitting spaghetti-strapped shirt in light pink that showed off some of her cleavage and accentuated her small bust, while her darker pink thin trousers accentuated her behind. Chris began to add, "Nice to meet you" to Dash, when Dakota interrupted him. Dakota angrily remarked, "I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to the cameras." Chris turned around to find a swarm of paparazzi behind him, snapping countless photos of her. Chris then scowled and threw a specially designed C4 at them, detonating a section of the dock and sending them hurtling off the island. Chris rolled his eyes as Dakota whimpered, "Why'd you have to do that?" Chris smiled strangely and added, "Just go stand with the other campers," as Dakota scowled and moved away. As he returned his focus to the next competitor, Chris stated, "Yeah, didn't want to deal with them if anyone was wondering, they are just too annoying if brought up too much." Before they proceeded to the new camper, Chris repositioned the camera away from Dakota's hands and stated, "Anyway, now meet and Maria." With dark eyeliner that accentuated her dark eyes and dark pink lipstick, and Maria had the appearance of someone from New Jersey. Her skin was dark tan, and she was currently using hairspray to hold up her long black hair. Her figure was the most endowed yet, with her large bust almost bursting out of her tight pink tube top and her rear, which was larger than Zoe's, barely contained in her light blue jeans. She was pleading for some kind of release from the constraints. And Maria smiled and waved to the others, saying, "Hey everyone. Hope you can handle all of me," before Chris coughed and cleared his throat since the hairspray she was spraying had blown downwind towards him. "Please go join the others," Chris stammered, finding it difficult to breathe due to the hairspray. Chris continued to cough and said, "And now meet Stacy," oblivious to the current camper's moans. Before Chris pulled out a roll of duct tape to cover her mouth, Stacy said, "Hey, did you know that my great-great-great-grandfather invented docks? Before that, people had to crash their boats into land. And before my great-great-great-great-grandfather invented boats, people just kind of floated on logs from one place to another." And before Chris groaned as he shoved her in the direction of the other campers, saying, "Oh God, I can finally hear my thoughts again. If any of you take that off, I am going to throw you into the ocean," Chris said, and the campers nodded in agreement with his strategy because Stacy was so unpleasant. Chris remarked, "Now where was I?" "Oh right." Cameron, as the short boy, who had dark brown skin, was somewhat shorter than Dawn, had extremely short hair, and was wearing a red hoodie and yellow shorts while tightening his spectacles. Cameron stroked his arm uneasily as Chris questioned, "How does it feel to be out of that bubble?" Cameron said softly, "It's nice, I just hope I don't get too injured," before heading out to join the others. Chris chuckled lightly as he turned back to face the boat. "Out next is Sam," he exclaimed as the second camper left, his head lowered as if he were playing a portable video game. Before Chris took the game away from Sam and hurled it behind him, causing the participant to pout, Sam cried, "Yes, jump! Jump!" Chris glared as he saw the child and muttered, "Eyes on me, kid." Wearing a light tan and dark orange sweater with blue jeans shorts, Sam wore spectacles, had frizzy auburn hair, and a small patchy goatee sprouting on his chin. He was scowling at the loss of his game. Sam frowned and remarked, "Fine, sorry, I was just finishing off a boss," before he exhaled in satisfaction that his game system was intact. Chris remarked, "Whatever, just don't play when I am talking," as Sam frowned and nodded. Chris exclaimed, "Next we have from the Australian outback is Jasmine," as a tall female emerged from the boat, bending to save her head from colliding with the boat's roof. She revealed her rich Australian accent as she stated, "Finally, it really was tiring to have to crouch the entire ride here." The girl's enormous height caused Chris to widen his eyes. She was easily over 6.5 feet tall, with dark skin and dark black hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing a tan hat, a tight-fitting white shirt that showed off her moderate bust, which she attempted to hide with a tan vest, and a pair of tan short shorts that barely covered her rather large rear and showed off all of her long, toned legs. Chris looked up at her and laughed nervously, tugging at his collar to calm himself. "Sorry, we didn't know you were this tall," he muttered. Jasmine laughed as she went off towards the other campers, saying, "It's fine, mate, a lot of people say that, though a little discomfort isn't anything new to me." As the next camper left, Chris shook his head and mumbled, Sorry about that folks, and next is Sky." He had to force himself not to stare at the towering woman. As she laughed at the camp behind him, Sky remarked, "Whoa, it really is a summer camp." If he recognized it correctly, Sky looked like someone of Cree descent. She had dark eyes and short black hair, and her tight pants, which seemed to be the kind of attire he had seen in gymnastics, showed off her toned legs and rear. Her sleeveless shirt was skin-tight and squeezed in her medium bust. As Sky nodded and grinned and moved away to join the others, Chris remarked, "Yes, it is. This is where you will be staying until you either win or get voted off." Chris sighed in his mind at the seemingly typical camper, which was extremely uncommon to him because the previous ones had all been strange or abnormal. "Our next camper is Ella," he muttered, watching the camper emerge from the boat while dancing and singing while squirrels and birds followed her. Ella's outfit shouted, "Princess," because it was light pink, terminated just above her knee, and showed off no cleavage but seemed to push up her bust. She even wore pink gloves that reached her elbows. Ella's black hair was styled in a princess-like fashion. "Please no singing. If you want to sing, then do it on your own time," Chris said with a frown as Ella pouted but nodded as she left, and the birds and squirrels chased after him to attack him because they were upset that he had interrupted the woman's angelic voice. Chris sighed as he held up an air horn to stop Ella from singing any longer because he knew from past seasons that singing did not help the ratings. As he straightened his clothes and cleared his throat, it took Chris around 5 minutes to get the animals to stop bothering him. "Sorry for that interruption, the next camper to join the game is Dave," Chris said as the next camper hurriedly wiped his hands with disinfection after getting off the boat. Chris answered, "Nice to meet you, Dave," seeming a little uncomfortable as he extended his hand to shake the boys. Dave screamed, "No. It's not nice. This place is covered with germs and everybody is so weird," before Chris silenced him and the sound of duct tape ripping interrupted his tirade. Dave had a white shirt, a blue sweater vest over it, and tan slacks to complete his ensemble. He had brown eyes, dark black hair, and tan complexion. Chris replied, "Now would you please go with the others and shut it or you'll be getting more duct tape, only next time I'll superglue it," as Dave approached the group but approached a little too closely for Sky's comfort. As two identical girls stepped off the boat, Chris exclaimed, "Good, now let's meet the twins, Amy and Sammy." They both had teal eyes and light blonde hair that ended just past their shoulders. They even wore the same outfit, which included short red skirts, calf-high boots, and a red sweater that accentuated their busts. The only visual distinguishing feature between them is the tiny beauty mark beneath one of the twins' right eyes. One of the twins said, "It's Sammy, not Sammy," and Sammy cautiously raised her hand. "Oh, don't be such a baby, Sammy," Amy cried, pushing her twin till she almost fell into the water, but before she could do so, a hand sprang out and grabbed her. When they looked up, the male said, "Hey, you alright?" The teen was wearing a long-sleeved red shirt with a black hooded vest that covered his face and head. He was also wearing long black jeans and black sandals. All Sammy could see was the man's fanged smile, which was accompanied by what appeared to be whiskers on his cheeks. While he stayed near her to check on her, Sammy murmured, yeah, thanks for saving me from that fall," the hooded teenager answered, "It's no problem, Sammy," with a brilliant smile that seemed to shine through the dark hood. As the teenager nodded and waved a sign off, Chris remarked, "And that would be our last contestant for this season, Naruto. Hood down so the audience can see you." Naruto raised a hand to put his hood down and remarked, Yeah, hold your horses, Chris, just had it up during the ride over when taking my nap." The hood fell down, and long red hair fell out of it, reaching his lower back, where it was tied in a ponytail, but not just any ponytail, because it was also spiked, and the man's eyes were a gorgeous shade of purple that gave him a relaxed appearance and noticeable tattoos that looked like whiskers. The girls on the island almost lost their breath. They believed, but in reality, they were birthmarks that they typically saw on foxes. With a scoff that demonstrated he had a deep voice to support it, Naruto asked, "There is that better," as he passed Sammy and then gave the twin a warm smile that made her heart race and her cheeks flush. He then proceeded to the other campers, standing next to Maria, who was drooling a little at him, and next to Jasmine, who was taken aback because he was the second tallest there and she was the first, but only 2 to 3 inches taller than him. When Chris pulled out a remote control and pushed it in the hopes of blowing up the boat, everyone was already off it and glaring at him for nearly pulling a dirty trick on them. "Yup, it's our roughest, toughest, most explosive season ever," he remarked. Chris said, whistling loudly, "Ahem, anyone campers, for your first challenge here I want you to run from here all the way to the finish line, which is in the forest, and to give you a little encouragement I'll do this," just before several trees were toppled, causing nearly everyone to scream in terror and dash into the forest, where there was a trail leading to the finish line. Naruto and the other campers laughed and said, "Woo! This is going to be interesting." What everyone noted after his outburst was that his eyes were still dulled, which gave him a weird expression while shouting, making him appear twice as cute in the eyes of the girls. "Wait up!" Sammy cried uneasily as she stumbled over a tree root and her sister abandoned her because she was terrified that something in the forest might harm her. The words, "Easy there, I got you," came to her in a tender voice as Naruto grabbed her up and ran back to the others, carrying her in a bridal carry. Sammy grinned as her blush came back with a fury. "Thanks Naruto," she whispered, feeling fortunate to be in her current posture where she was comfortable and able to feel some of Naruto's taut, compressed muscles. She blushed darker as he laughed and replied, "It's all right, Sammy. I wouldn't want anyone to get hurt this soon. But I might have to keep an eye on you if you keep tripping," he joked. I wouldn't mind at all," Sammy murmured, her head exploding with excitement at this fantastic chance. The two were unaware that a number of girls were staring at their fleeing shapes, feeling envious and wishing they were in Sammy's shoes, while the other girls were perplexed by the unidentified emotion they were feeling for the first time. The white finish line, which they had to cross to win, was finally visible after a 5-minute run during which campers were attempting to talk to each other. Because of her long legs, Jasmine was ahead of the pack until Naruto and Sammy passed her at the last second, with Naruto carrying Sammy. She grinned. Even though Sammy had enjoyed being carried by him, she replied with an atomic dark blush, "Why, you didn't have to carry me the entire way." He smiled and put her down, saying, "It was no problem, I was fun as you were so small and easy to carry." She missed the sensation of being in his arms as soon as she was gently set down on the ground and began to long for it once again. "What's wrong with you?" Sammy attempted to get rid of the feeling she had earlier, but it persisted. Maybe it's not an act, maybe he's really genuine, she thought. You just met him today and falling for him all too easily, you don't know if that is all an act or not. When Chris screeched something on his megaphone to get their attention, her thoughts paused. As the last campers crossed the finish line, Chris remarked, "Naruto, you're in Team A. Sammy, you're in Team B. As I point to you, you all will count off in ones and twos, ones will be with Naruto, twos will be with Sammy." "What? No, I'd prefer to be on Naruto's team." Sammy shouted to herself, unknowingly pointing in Naruto's direction. Chris said, "Jasmine, you are a 1, which made her very delighted. Due to slow running, it took some time to formally begin assigning everyone to teams. "Okay, where is Dawn?" Chris frowned, unable to see her. Naruto remarked, "Ah Chris, she's been behind you for like a while now." She showed up after Scott, as Chris turned around and jumped a little, getting a chill when he saw Dawn appear suddenly. He exclaimed, "Jesus! Dawn, do not do that," as Dawn gave him a perplexed expression. Dawn looked at the redhead who had seen her before. The boy shrugged his shoulders and questioned in confusion, "What does that mean?" Chris tried to make a joke, but all he got were cricket noises. "Okay, Dawn, just go to the other people," he said deadpan as she approached the redhead's group, who gave her a warm smile. Chris pointed to the twin and said, "Scott, you got team 2. The twin complained but still left. The final teams were Naruto with Jasmine, Dawn, Dave, Sky, Amy, and Maria, Mike, Zoe, and Cameron as Chris began to count off the additional persons who had arrived. Since the last member had not yet arrived, Sammy's team ultimately consisted of Sammy, Scott, Lightning, Sam, Joe, Ella, B, Dakota, and Brick. Chris scowled into the trees and said, "Okay, seriously, who is an hour late to a 5-minute run?" Naruto raised his hand suggestively and asked, "Want me to go look for her, Chris?" Jasmine blushed as she inadvertently did the same. Chris answered, "Nope, I don't want anyone else to get lost and wait any longer than necessary," but then he heard breathing approaching their location and seen Stacy, the final competitor, arrive. As Stacy staggered up to her squad, Chris said, "Finally. Okay, you go to Sammy's team and hurry, as thanks to you we are an hour behind schedule." Stacy immediately regained her enthusiasm and asked, "You know my great-great-great-great-grandfather invited schedules?" Before Chris cleared his throat, the entire camp, minus a few, yelled in exasperation, "We don't care." Scott pointed out the obvious question that had been on everyone's mind before, saying, "Okay, so just wondering, but what was that in the forest?" Cameron began to tremble with fear and remarked, "I'm pretty sure that cry doesn't belong to any animal species." Since Chris responded indifferently, "Calm down, everything will make sense in due time," before he burst out laughing. When Chris stopped giggling, Naruto arched an eyebrow and said, "You done?" The host smirked and said, "Yeah, I'm done," wiping away a tear from his eyes from laughing too hard. Now, this season of Total Drama will be a little different. For example, in every episode, someone will be eliminated with a very rare chance of there being no elimination at all depending on my mood. Also, unlike last season, you'll at least get a few days of rest in between challenges. Thanks again to Courtney's lawyers on the last bit, he thought to himself before he observed the campers' reactions. The cast had conflicting opinions about what was revealed because they were essentially left up to Chris's discretion regarding the type and timing of the challenges. The campers agreed that Chris would have been a sadist who faced elimination challenges daily until the end of the season, and they were grateful that they weren't dealing with the same Chris as they had in the previous 3 seasons. With a smirk, Chris pulled out a tiny wooden head of himself and said, "Anyway, since you all are first-timers, I'm going to cut you a break and hide this bad boy somewhere in the campgrounds." A genuine McLean brand Chris head, your free ticket back into the game even if your teammates vote you off. Whoever finds this will figuratively become the most powerful player in the show's history, he said before bringing the Chris head closer to examine it more closely. "Is the cleft on my chin really that big?" Chris asked innocently. Scott answered, "Yup, and it looks like an ass," which caused a few players to chuckle at the double illusion. Chris then gave Scott a deadpan look while raising an eyebrow. As his interns brought in a green and red flag, the green representing the rats and the red representing the maggots, Chris concluded, "Going forward, I believe it's time for the teams to get their names, and before any one of you thinks of suggesting names, I already thought of them," pointing to Naruto's team. "For the A's, they will be named the mutant maggots. And for the B's, they will be the toxic rats." What's up with the references to chemical waste?" Mike inquired naively, echoing everyone else's opinions because Chris's point seemed somewhat strange. A roar that could be heard all over the island cut off their train of thinking, and the competitors recognized it from before they started their run. "It's the monster!" Cameron exclaimed, pointing to the distance where he saw multiple trees fall, signaling that the monster was approaching their location. This made a number of cast members uncomfortable, such as when Zoe and Mike hugged each other without cause and Cameron crouched to defend himself, while Sammy, Ella, Jasmine, and Anna Marie grabbed hold of Naruto, causing him to raise an eyebrow in surprise because he wasn't even slightly scared of what was about to happen. The different ideas that were going through the minds of the girls who hugged Naruto were, "Why did I do that, I wonder? It must be instincts or something, because I'm not afraid at all. Why did I even fall for Naruto?" Jasmine thought as she quickly released Naruto, blushing a little from what she had done. With her body embracing Naruto's back and her hands touching his washboard abs, Anna Marie thought, me likes, I could enjoy this all day. The sensation alone was making Anna Marie a little sexy. However, Sammy and Ella's thoughts were abruptly cut off. They were primarily embarrassed, mumbling about how well-defined Naruto's muscles were, and Ella was thinking about how brave Naruto was acting. Soon after, a hairless squirrel with slitted eyes emerged from the bushes to greet the competitors. Joe exclaimed, "Hey, it's just a stupid squirrel," while Dawn appeared exhausted and Dakota couldn't stop squealing with delight at how adorable the critter was. Simply saying, "Cool," Naruto approached it and picked it up before it nuzzled into his hand, unknowingly using his affinity for nature to gain Dawn's favor. Dakota's shriek soon became a little scream as she observed the hairless squirrel blinking strangely, appearing reptilian due to its two sets of eyelids. Dawn said, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with it?" after noticing that the animal kept blinking before crawling away from Naruto and beginning to dig in order to extract and consume a worm. Later, it spotted a butterfly and, like a frog, stretched its tongue out to eat it. Before Dakota approached and knelt down to have a closer look at the nude squirrel, Chris stated, "While we were away, I rented out the island to a nice, family-oriented biohazardous waste disposal company, sweet people, but the waste is having a teensy bit of an impact on the flora and fauna." As she exclaimed, "Weird, I want one," the squirrel snarled, then let out a huge roar, and what appeared to be lasers burst out of its eyes. The beams just missed her as she leaped to her feet and landed in a pair of arms, only to see Naruto grinning down at her, making Dakota flush. "Oh my god. My gosh. I'm being held by the hottie. Oh, I believe I will now die contentedly." Dakota was so near to Naruto right now that she could feel his muscles against her back, so she let out a little squeal in her mind before he pulled her back down and made her pout for missing the position. Then, before leaping back into the bushes, the nude squirrel blew a raspberry at the competitors. Before getting up, he observed, "Might want to be careful there, Dakota, these animals are probably a bit testy." Dakota's blush darkened as he comfortingly rubbed her arms. Chris said, "Now before we start our very first challenge of the season, let's give out some rewards. Since Naruto got here first, you'll be earning your team with a trampoline while Sammy earned her team a hacksaw." Chef suddenly appeared, jumping on a trampoline and holding up a hacksaw before the same naked squirrel from earlier appeared above it and threw several nuts at him. This caused Chef to lose his focus and fall off the trampoline, which caused Joe and Lightning to laugh before Chef threw the hacksaw at the two. Chris said, "What do these items have to do with this challenge?" "Well, follow me to find out," as he led the competitors a short distance from where they were now. They eventually arrived at a river where two totems were carved into their team mascots and were tied to the trees above. The competitors were then positioned a few yards away from the totems while Chris stood in front of them to make his announcement. Chris made the contestants gasp when he pulled out a kill switch and pressed the button to begin the countdown. Those are your team totems. You'll need to cut M down and get M in the river and ride M back to the campground. The first team there gets their pick of the cabins while the losing team will be on the chopping block tonight, but you guys better hurry, the totems are rigged with bombs, he said, causing the contestants to gasp. Come on everyone, Naruto said, turning to face his squad and grinning as he scooped up the trampoline. They all nodded and hurried away as Dawn materialized beside him. With no shame, Dawn said, "May I get a carry? I don't think I am fast enough to keep up." The few girls behind her gave her a kind of look before Naruto laughed. As he stooped down and allowed her to clamber onto his back before he got up, Naruto chuckled and said, "Fine, come on." He blushed slightly as he felt her put her arms around his neck and press herself against him while she gazed about in wonder. As they ran through the forest, Dawn whispered, "You can see so much more of nature up here." He couldn't help but chuckle, which caused her to frown a little. "What? Is something I said funny?" she said bewilderedly as he turned his head and grinned at her. She nodded sympathetically, and he responded, "No, I'm just glad you're enjoying the view, considering I'm a very tall person and you're kind of short." "Well, let's focus on the challenge," he remarked, as Dawn nodded and kept scanning the area from her new perspective. They were moving quickly and had almost reached the totems when they stopped at a little spot of muck. He scowled at Dave, who was pacing anxiously there. As Dave gasped as if Naruto had just informed him he had slain his mother, Naruto responded, "What's wrong, Dave? Just walk through it." Dave shielded his eyes from it and whispered uneasily, "I can't. Dirty mud, so much germs." Before swiftly grabbing Dave by the back of his shirt, Naruto rolled his eyes at the germaphobe. "Well then you're coming with me I guess," he said, lifting the shorter guy off the ground and running across the mud, disregarding his now soiled shoes. They were almost halfway through it when Dave writhed in Naruto's clutches and screamed, "Let me go. Your hands have germs." Smiling, the inspired Olympian Sky exclaimed, "Hey Dave, right? It's going to be alright, it's nothing to fear, I know you can do this. Thanks for calming the kid down, I was real close to dropping him," the redhead added, laughing as he felt Dave instantly relax in his hands and flush slightly. Sky blushed and nodded. "Ugh, why do I always have to burp when I talk to boys I like?" Sky said, covering her mouth as she almost belched before sprinting ahead of the redhead. Before he dismissed it, she shouted in her mind as she walked away from the bewildered redhead. "Okay, who here is good with a trampoline?" Naruto questioned as Sky, Amy, and Dawn, who was still on his back, raised their hands. Naruto soon arrived at the totems and grinned upon seeing the majority of his squad either there already or just behind him. As Jasmine raised her hand, Naruto remarked, "Good, you three try and jump onto the totem while I try and find an axe or something to cut it." As she took two pocket knives out of her vest pockets, she remarked, "I have a few knives that we can use." As his team nodded, he reassured them, saying, "Good. Once you three grab onto the totem, we'll carefully toss the closed knife up to you all. Take your time and go at your own pace as the other team can't get up to the totem as we can. Don't worry about the timer as we should be able to do it in time." Amy began jumping on the trampoline first, and he lowered Dawn back onto the ground without noticing the frown on the girl's face. He was impressed by Amy's ability to jump up to the totem and grab onto it on her first attempt, probably because she had cheered before. "Good job, Amy, now be careful, we are tossing up the knife," he said, nodding to Jasmine, who threw up the first knife before Dawn tried to jump up to the totem. Amy screamed, "You expect me to cut through this tree with a knife," as she pulled the blade from her pocket knife. Naruto shouted back up to the beauty-marked twin, who scowled and went to work after she jumped a little and almost fell when Dawn unexpectedly materialized by her on the totem. "No, just make it weak and I think I should be able to make it fall." Dawn questioned, "Do you need help?" Amy scowled but shook her head. Amy remarked, "No. Go help on another part so we can go faster," since she was unsure of how the girl with the pale blonde hair had gotten on the totem without her seeing. As Sky landed on the totem and grabbed the third knife, Naruto cried, "Hurry up guys, the other team is fully here now." "You are going down, you weird tiki." Lightning screamed as he sprinted for the totem, sprang up, and then face-planted into its base. "Aw man. The other team is already getting started," he remarked, frowning, before glaring at the totem. Joe glared at him and yelled, "Can it lightning? If one of us can climb up it, we still have a challenge to win." As Lightning tried to scale the tree, he exclaimed, "Yes sir." Joe snarled, "I'm a girl." Before he tumbled from the totem and hit the ground again, Lightning retorted, "Don't joke around. Lightning needs to focus." They had almost reached halfway through it before the blade's lack of length prevented them from going any deeper, so Sky screamed back, "Nearly there Naruto." He shouted, "Okay, carefully fall off one at a time so I can catch you carefully," as Dawn simply let herself go from the totem, causing Amy and Sky to flush. "Next time, give me a warning will you?" Naruto remarked, laughing as he caught Dawn with ease. Dawn gazed up at him from his arms and nodded, unfazed by the fall, before he put her down. His hands were out to catch her as she stared down at him, and he cried, "Sky, you go next." Before letting herself fall from the totem, Sky blushed and almost burped once more. She clenched her eyes shut and felt herself land in a set of warm, powerful arms. "See, wasn't so bad," Naruto said as she opened her eyes to see the redhead grinning down at her with her fangs. Sky began to speak, Sorry, I didn't mean to dash," but Naruto put her down while still grinning. The Kree girl had to hastily turn her head to the side as she burped a little and her flush turned into one of humiliation. He caressed her hair and laughed, saying, "Don't worry, the nerves of falling and into a stranger's arms no less is bound to be weird." As Sky raised an eyebrow and nervously caressed her arm, Dave reassured her, "Don't worry, Sky. I understand how your stomach must upset itself from being in someone's arms. All the germs must upset you like they do with me." Sky hurried over to the taller lady and said, Sure, oh Jasmine, here's your knife back." She scowled as she noticed Scott resting against a tree beside her teammate. Before the slick-back farmer took the knife from Sky's hand, Jasmine rolled her eyes at Scott and remarked, "Oh thanks Sky, Dawn already gave me mine back." As he took a larger knife from its sheath in his back pocket, Scott remarked, A nice knife but it's too small unlike mine." As Scott winced at his unsuccessful attempt to win over the Australian beauty, Jasmine said coolly, "I'm sorry, buddy, but size doesn't matter for these fellas. These are used for simple jobs like cutting down twigs, and that one you have there is for gutting animals, so it's apples and oranges. Now can you give me back my knife?" Jasmine put her hand on the Cree girl's shoulder and brought her back to her team, saying, "Thank you, now come on Sky, our team is nearly done." They all laughed as they noticed Amy clutching the totem and staring down at Naruto. When Amy continually refused to fall into Naruto's arms because she didn't trust him and wasn't on her cheer squad, Naruto exclaimed in mild annoyance, "Amy! I told you I will catch you." Naruto rolled his eyes and moaned as he watched the other squad rapidly gaining up to them. "No. I don't want to fall and hit the ground when you drop me," she cried. Naruto moaned as he made the decision to take independent action. "We don't have enough time for this." She responded, "Well, just have my sister catch M-" before she was frozen in place as the redhead arrived beside her, his arm wrapped around her waist. With her face inches from his, he said, "Let go so we can go back down." Amy's brain shut down as she flushed, then her hold relaxed and she and Naruto fell off the totem, and she saw him smoothly land on the ground with only a low groan. As they retreated from the totem, he shouted to his crew, "Okay, everyone back up while I make it fall." Cameron assisted in removing the limp Amy from the totem. As he positioned the trampoline where he wanted it, Jasmine inquired inquisitively, "How are you going to knock it over? It's only half cut into and still standing strong." He gave it a couple solid test hops and then got off and backed up a good distance, saying, "Don't worry, I have a plan." Naruto grinned and sprinted up to the trampoline, saying, "I've wanted to do this since my teacher taught me how to do it." Everyone gasped as Naruto leaped off the trampoline so fast that he flew in the direction of the totem, adjusting himself in midair to point his legs in that direction. A loud, audible crack occurred from the base of the totem, and Naruto said, grinning broadly, "Dynamic entry." As they watched the totem slowly tilt and Naruto swiftly descend on the ground underneath it, Scott exclaimed in disbelief, "No way." As the totem leaned back towards Naruto, Mike cried, "Move out of the way." Naruto simply grinned and lifted his hands to grab the totem as it dropped on him. Before they opened their eyes to find Naruto bearing the totem on his shoulder with a smirk as if it weighed nothing, everyone hastily closed their eyes, expecting to hear some sort of scream of anguish. With a start, Jasmine said, "No way. That totem has to at least be 2 tons. Naruto turned to his squad and grinned, saying, "What can I say? I'm really strong." "Now, as much as I love carrying a totem with a bomb strapped to it, but shouldn't we hurry?" he asked, jolting them out of their reverie. Joe shouted, "Hurry up. Get ours cut." As she saw Naruto and his group dash back down toward the cabins. Jasmine offered to try bearing some of the burden, but she questioned, "Are you sure you can handle this?" As she smiled and fanned herself, and Maria said, "Of course he can. Just look at those muscles. He could carry me around any day," she purred as Naruto laughed. Since they arrived at the mud hole once more, he added, "Trust me, Jasmine, my teacher and job require a lot of heavy lifting, heavier than boulders, so I'm used to this." Fortunately, Dave was not among them, since Amy had decided to drag the Germaverse child through the muck against his will. As she began to see the cottages, Zoe grinned and said, "Come on, we're almost there." Joe shouted, "Move out of the way, slowpokes," as her team sped past them, almost running over Zoe before Naruto grabbed her aside before Mike could make her smile with joy. Naruto threw the totem to the ground and yanked everyone on before they swiftly caught up with them. "Damn it! Lean forward everyone, use all your weight," he said. Lightning shouted at Naruto, "Whoa, not cool dude, stealing our idea." He laughed and thrust out his leg, striking their totem and gradually forcing them to turn away from the cabins and head toward a clearing that led to the lake. Naruto smirked evilly and said, "Sorry, all's fair in love and war, and right now we are in a challenge, so sorry but not sorry as this is war," before giving them the two-finger salute and crashing into the clearing, nearly falling into the river. "I think we win this," Naruto remarked as he swiftly snatched up the totem and slammed it into the ground in front of the more attractive cabin. His grin widened as he gradually used his heel to slow down, coming to a complete stop in front of Chris. The host watched the other team shuffle towards the cabins and said, "Not only do you win not being covered in pink paint, but you also chose the new cabin that has a hot tub, free TV, and snack fridges. Excellent job, mutant maggots. You win the challenge," Chris exclaimed as the bomb's timer blinked off and an explosion rang out behind them, sending a cloud of pink paint rising into the sky. Naruto acknowledged, while Chris, that was evil but hilarious, and his crew, relieved not to lose, concurred to some extent. As Stacy removed the duct tape that her team had replaced over her lips, Chris remarked, "Unfortunately, toxic rats, you not only have to scrub that paint off but you also have to vote a member off your team." Before everyone moaned in frustration, Stacy began to speak. "Oh, did I tell you about how my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather invented voting, and before that everyone let out an irritated groan, 'Oh my God, shut up.'" Naruto gave everyone the peace sign and added, "If anyone needs me, I'll be in my new room," before his squad closely followed. Chris yelled, "Make sure you be at the elimination tonight, so your team can watch who gets voted off," as he no longer wanted to put up with Stacy's rumblings. A few minutes prior to the ceremony for the campfire, Naruto sighed contentedly and grinned as he walked out of the bathroom, drying his hair with a towel. Since his team had won and was safe, he wasn't particularly interested in attending the campfire ceremony, but his smile was slightly frozen when he noticed that almost his whole team was seated in the cabin's main room, and he was standing in front of them in nothing but a towel. Amy's blush mirrored the color of her outfit as she exclaimed, "Oh dear God, cover up," before covering her eyes, despite peeking out between her fingers. As Naruto reddened slightly and covered his chest with the towel he had been using to dry his hair, and Maria exclaimed, "Whoa! I bet you could grate cheese off those." Naruto responded, "Sorry. I thought you were all at the ceremony," and hurried back to his room to change into his regular clothes. As Naruto moaned in his room, and Maria exclaimed, "Did you see his towel? I swear I thought I saw him hiding a third leg underneath there." The girls on his squad, including Dawn, reddened deeply. Jasmine got up from the table and hurried to the door, stammering, "Maybe we should check out the campfire ceremony after all." Before Jasmine returned and hauled her out of the cabin, and Maria shouted, "No way. I'm staying here, maybe I can get lucky with the hunk and maybe get a strip tease." Maria screamed and kicked, "No, let me go. I want to stay. I need to see more of Smexim Chadi." As the other members of the team either turned green or blushed horribly at the sight of another man's trash. Campfire rituals. Before he noticed someone missing, Chris smirked and continued, "Welcome to the first campfire ceremony of the new season. This season we added it where the other team can watch you get voted out, adding to the embarrassment of it all." As Sky held out her hand, Chris asked inquisitively, Where's Naruto?" Sky attempted to reply, "He's still at the cab dash," but was cut off. "Right here," Naruto responded, coughing, while wearing only a black tank top, orange and black shorts, and sandals. Sky could see that he was still a little damp from his shower. Chris cleared his throat and remarked, "Oh good, wouldn't want anyone to miss the first one." Before he removed a tarp from the big object behind him, Chris stated, "So this ceremony is simple, one by one your teammates' video votes will be tallied as they were cast shortly before this, but the spectators get to personally see who votes for whom. The camper with the most votes will be eliminated from the game and sent off the island as a huge catapult appeared behind him," Chris said, "the hurl of shame. Patent pending. With only a 20% injury ratio it has been deemed safe by the lawyers of this show." Brick hesitantly questioned, "Are you sure that it still counts as safe?" While Chris laughed. "Oh and my, a stroke of luck, it's all for the same person," exclaimed the host as a screen lifted from the floor and then switched on to display the videos of 9 of the campers. "One by one, I will play the votes and the marshmallows will be passed out," Chris stated, disregarding the cadet's query. Chris stated, "You all voted out," while hitting the play button on the screen. Everyone's voices echoed, "Stacy," as the chatty girl scowled. As Chef, wearing a radioactive costume, threw the bright green marshmallow into Stacy's hands, causing all of her hair to fall out except for a few strands, Chris remarked, "Stacy, you have been voted off and get the marshmallow of toxic loserdom." As she was launched off the island onto the catapult, Stacy exclaimed, "Wait till my grandfather who invented the marshmallow hears about this." Mike remarked, and the others agreed, "Did it seem quieter all of a sudden, or is it just me?" As the team was still covered in pink, Chris stated, "Well, you are all free now, so go back to your cabin or something," before turning to laugh at the toxic rats. "And you all clean off or something," he added. As the other twin chuckled, Sammy said, "Hey Amy, is it possible for me to use your cabin's shower? The showers close to our cabin weren't functioning earlier." Amy answered, dismissing the notion right away, No, you wish little sister." As Sammy, Ella, and Dakota grinned at him, Naruto added, "Don't worry, you can use mine, Sammy. Anyone who needs a shower can use mine, but let the girls go first as this pain is probably not good for their skin." Joe sprinted by the others, shouting, "Out of my way, I'm showering first," so she could enjoy what she would likely not get for the remainder of the season. Lightning exclaimed in confusion, "Wait, why is Joe showering first? He isn't a girl," while the other members returned to their cabin to gather their showering supplies and bide their time to use the rival team's shower. Not caring that Joe had fled, Sammy took the 3 girls to his cabin and said, "Thanks Naruto," with a gentle smile. As the females nodded, Naruto remarked, "We can wait until Joe gets out and then you all can take turns." Dakota shrugged his shoulders casually and remarked, "This is really nice of you, Naruto. You didn't have to offer, but you still did. I like to help, what can I say, it doesn't really matter for me, so feel free to visit our cabin whenever, that's fine with your guys, right?" he asked his teammates as they nodded. Jasmine perceived the orange-haired youngster named Scott as trouble and didn't think it was appropriate for him to be in their cabin alone himself, so she answered, "Sounds fine with us, just come over when we are there." As they arrived at the cabin, Naruto remarked, "It also helps since the cabin is unisex and helps give everyone their privacy," but he glimpsed Scott frowning at the news. "Thank goodness though the doors to all our rooms were able to lock for added privacy," Naruto stated. And Maria purred as she approached Naruto and traced her finger down his arm as he moved forward to peep down her shirt. "In my opinion, I wouldn't mind having an open door when it comes to a certain redhead," she added. Before unlocking the door and letting everyone into their cabin, Naruto laughed at Maria's remarks. Now I really need to lock my door, he thought. As he surveyed the area, Lightning exclaimed, "Whoa, this place is huge." The jock exclaimed, "This should have been Lightning's cabin," while Naruto laughed. Cameron remarked, "Yeah, we figured as much with how popular the show was in past seasons that Chris must have had to put something useful in the budget," as he rapidly calculated the cost in his head. Naruto hurriedly walked everyone around, letting them hear the shower in his room running, and remarked, "Well, this is the 4th season, I'm betting even with the cost of this he still had a lot of money left over for himself." Sam exclaimed, "Whoa! You guys have video games," as Naruto grinned and raised his hand. Since he enjoyed playing video games but didn't make it his contribution, Naruto acknowledged, Yeah, these are mine, dude." As everyone grinned and agreed, he said, "You guys can play some, we can make a night of it." And Maria hurried to her feet and followed Naruto as he said, "I'll get some drinks and snacks. Apparently we get refills on all this stuff every week or so." Then, she grabbed his arm and buried it between her bust. She answered, "I'll accompany you," and he laughed as they entered the kitchen. And Maria leaned on the island counter in front of him, allowing him to see her cleavage once more. "So Naruto, are you seeing anyone right now back home?" she said. He went closer to her and ran his fingers down her cheek, whispering with a chuckle, "Relationships can happen so quickly in games like this." "Actually I am not, but you know what they say," he added. And Maria could only squeal as she was enthralled with the redhead's purple eyes, which she insisted were getting darker and darker until their twinkling made them resemble priceless pearls. Just as Maria was about to lean forward and leave the kitchen with the 2 liters of soda, cups, and chips, Naruto grinned and leaned back. He began to laugh when he heard a frustrated moan coming from the kitchen. He sat down in a chair in the living room, where everyone else was seated on the couches surrounding the coffee table, watching a horror film. "Can't be too easy now, can I?" he asked himself. As the jock left his room, Naruto remarked, "Oh good, Joe, you're done." He then watched Dakota leave for his chamber, saying, "Whoever wants to go next can go." Joe questioned in confusion, "What are you all doing?" as Cameron grinned at her. As Joe sneered, the former bubble boy added, "Come on and join us, we're watching a movie." Joe remarked, "I don't like movies, I'm going back to my cabin," but Jasmine chuckled and dragged her over to the couch. Mike slid gently closer to Zoe and added, "Come on, just enjoy the movie, after this you can go back to being cold. Think of this as a party celebrating us entering the total drama game scene." Joe pushed onto the couch and muttered, "Whatever, I guess I'll stay. Make some room, there is not enough space for everyone." Joe cried as Dawn got up from the couch and approached Naruto. While taking a sip of his cola, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the young girl. "You need something, Dawn?" he questioned, and she nodded. As he coughed up his beverage and the other people in the room performed a spit take, Dawn requested, "May I sit on your lap to watch the movie?" What? Dawn, that's a bold claim, Naruto replied while sipping his Coke. "Please?" Dawn asked, her eyes like a puppy dog displaying her unusual emotion. As Dawn nodded and shifted onto his lap, Naruto mentally moaned, "Ugh," as he slumped over from the force of her puppy dog eyes. Fine, just be careful," he muttered, setting down his soda cup. The other campers tried not to chuckle at Dawn's little size in comparison to Naruto and her resemblance to a lap dog, which was appropriate considering the puppy dog looks she had just used on him. Throughout the film, a number of girls were gradually making their way to Naruto's location. Ella scooted over to his left side and rested her head on his shoulder, while Dakota did the same on his right side. Sky then rested her head back against Naruto's surprisingly cozy legs. However, Dawn had to go back a little more onto his lap so Sky wouldn't have to feel her legs. She then unintentionally began grinding against Naruto's pelvis, which caused him to respond by blushing and trying not to moan, as she wrapped her small arms around his arms. He whispered to her, "Dawn, please be careful," as she turned to face him in confusion. She asked, "Careful about what?" As he waved it away, struck by her innocence and purity. "And never mind, just try not to move too much," he said quietly, and she nodded gently before returning her attention to the film. She soon leaned her head back and placed it against his chest as she began to hear his heart beating strongly. Naruto's movie seemed to drag on forever as he battled to remain composed. When it was over, he moaned because he saw that every girl resting on him was sound asleep. He muttered, "Can someone help?" as Jasmine grinned and laughed at him. Unable to resist, she took a camera out of one of her pouches and snapped a short photo. Jasmine gently lifted Dawn from his lap and murmured, "I got you, Naruto," but she flushed as she felt a hard object press against her hand as she reached beneath Dawn. I'll be back for the others in a second," she said. Naruto exhaled in relief because, in addition to Jasmine freeing his legs, everyone else had either gone to sleep or left, so no one noticed his situation before he picked up Dakota and Ella simultaneously, which was easy given his long arm span. When he finally arrived at the rats' cabin, he searched for their assigned beds, which fortunately Joe had informed him of as he entered. As she clutched to him in her sleep, Dakota muttered, "No, Daddy, don't ignore me, I just want us to be a family." He scowled and swiftly but tenderly set Ella down in her crib. He whispered to the blonde, "Dakota, you have to let go," as she scowled and clung to him more tightly. He then used his free hand to pet her head to help her relax. He grinned when he saw Dakota's hold loosen, and he was able to remove his arm from her grasp and replace it with one of her extra pillows. As he left the rat's cabin and made his way back to his own, he thought, exhausting first day. He hoped the game would retain its interest level since he sensed it would live up to its moniker, Total Drama. Naruto let out a weary sigh as he popped his joints and got out of bed, thinking for the millionth time that he was finally home. It always went like this: he would dream about his past, his house, and his friends, and then all of a sudden his happiness would be dashed. Sometimes the dreams weren't even dreams, but rather nightmares because he was constantly forced to watch his friends die. The fear of the nightmares always subsided once he realized he was no longer there, but it always took him some time to stop his heart from beating so quickly. Naruto sighed and frowned as he gripped the kunai beneath his pillow. The war, it's been 2 years and I still have nightmares of Madara, the Jubi, and Kagaya slaughtering them. At least I stopped them before I came here, he thought. Although he didn't anticipate the atomic-sized explosion that resulted from using the last of the Bijuu's energy to tear Kagaya's energy from her, he could still recall it as the reason he was here in the first place. Kagaya's dimensional powers caused him to fall through multiple wormholes, tearing away his chakra bit by bit with each portal he passed through. Occasionally, he swore that he could hear the faint murmurs of familiar voices in the back of his head, but he had no idea what had happened to the Bijuu and assumed they were back in the elemental nations, waiting to reform or live out their lives peacefully. When someone knocked on his door, he snapped out of his reverie, hurriedly changed into a new outfit, opened the door, and grinned to see Jasmine standing there. He grinned a little wider and asked, "What's up?" The Australian girl returned the smile. Jasmine nervously massaged the back of her neck as she added, "A couple of us are going to walk around the island and get a better feeling for it. They thought you would want to come along since you seem to be able to help keep the mutant animals at bay." He asked, "So how are you enjoying the game so far?" as he left his room, locking it behind him. "Oh, okay, that sounds fine. I don't think they will attack us that much as long as we don't show any harm," he said, looking at her as they left the cabin a few meters away. Jasmine grinned as she began to adjust to the equally tall redhead. "It's okay, some of the people are a bit weird but everyone seems nice enough," she said, and he laughed. He remarked, "Sounds about right, a little weirdness never hurt anybody too much," as they made their way to the anticipated beach. Scott scoffingly remarked, "Oh good, you got the animal tamer, great, now hopefully nothing will attack us," as the two approached the gathering. With a laugh that made Scott blush a little, Naruto said, "Keep it up, Scott, and I'll make sure they go for you first." "Calm down, man, I'm just kidding you," he said hurriedly. Sammy hesitantly said, "See, can I please stay here where it's safe?" before Naruto ruffled her head and grinned down at her. He pointed to the meditating girl surrounded by squirrels and small birds, and said, "That's fine, Sammy. Aside from that, I think both Dawn and Ella have the same effect on animals as I do." The princess was twirling around singing a soft song as various sets of birds flew around her, undoubtedly responding to the pleasing harmony. "Only they have their own methods to calm them," he said. Dawn opened her eyes and mumbled, "Yes, you can stay with us if you wish," oblivious to the 3 squirrels perched on her head. She had heard Sammy ask Naruto the question. Before he saw Sammy, Cameron, and a few others remain with Ella and Dawn, Naruto shrugged and said, "The tour shouldn't be that long anyway, we'll be back here once we are done." Amy, who didn't want to stay behind with the scaredy cats, shivered as she following, saying, "I still find it weird that the animals would change this much due to toxic waste." Toxic waste. Sam shuddered, "That stuff can be crazy, I've seen it do some crazy stuff in video games," recalling the different video games he had played that featured the stuff in question. Then, as it flew past them, he ducked to avoid what appeared to be a snake with a wing from a seagull before crashing into a tree. While the others rolled their eyes at the jock, Lightning smirked and flexed his biceps, declaring, "If those freaky animals try anything, Lightning will give them the thunder." Naruto remarked, "Don't think your thunder will be able to handle it, if something like a bear comes out of the woods," and Lightning scowled slightly but kept moving forward while the blonde gave the jock a back pat while grinning. Joe looked at Naruto's muscles and said, "So how exactly did you get strong enough to carry that totem?" in an astonished tone. "Well, I was trained since I was 5 to lift twice my weight, daily, so picking up that totem was a piece of cake," Naruto replied, flexing his biceps and rolling up his sleeves slightly to make his point, which ultimately caused some girls to blush as they gazed at his well-defined muscles. And Maria snatched his arm and squeezed it several times, feeling how hard it was. "Wow, you really are one hot piece of man," she said, grinning and grabbing onto his muscles. I bet I could bounce a coin off of any part of you," she purred some more, and Naruto laughed and continued to walk, not considering whether and Marie held onto his arm. With genuine admiration for the redhead's shrug, Joe questioned, "Is there any way for us to get this kind of muscles?" With a slight frown on his face, Naruto responded, "You mean besides training since almost birth?" "My training was done since I was 5 after all, so I don't think you can do much," before looking down at Marie, who had pushed his arm between her incredibly large chest and trailed a finger along it. Then again, I had a sadist of a teacher that did things at a ridiculous level, he said. Joe pouted and complained, "Crap, shame you weren't on my team," before silence fell over the group as they walked around the island and to the meeting spot. Any mutant animals that might be considering attacking would typically approach Naruto and hover around him because they appeared to be at ease with him. They didn't question it because they were safe as long as Naruto did what he did, so they continued going until it appeared like they were nearing the end of the tour. This also happened if Dawn or Ella were present, though not to the full extent of Naruto's strange abilities. As she heard more and more terrifying echoes coming from the surrounding woodland, Dakota shivered and approached Naruto. "So where do you think Chris hid the immunity token?" she inquired. Jasmine responded, "If he is like he was in past seasons, then he most likely hid it somewhere that we would never hope to look, or probably somewhere that's super dangerous," as she rubbed her chin in contemplation. However, a strong hand pulled her away from a bush just as a huge frog's tongue sprang out and attempted to grab her, but missed its target and shot back into the bush. The Australian Amazon blushed slightly and nodded before following the redhead as they began to approach the beach. Naruto laughed and added, "Whoa there, Jasmine, keep out of the thoughts until we get back to the beach." The rest of the group engaged in light conversation as they traveled to their destination, such as Sam and Dakota discussing their tech withdrawal after being warned to leave them at their cabin, or Chris would literally steal them and not return them until the two were eliminated. Joe and Cameron discussed the type of challenge they would face next, with Cameron hoping it would be a mental competition and Joe just wanting a good physical one, before they got into a small argument. After arriving at their destination, they discovered that the other contestants they had not previously seen were already at the beach, sitting on whatever they could find. Zoe and Mike were chatting away, comparing their interests and hobbies, such as action movies and kickboxing. Bee and Sky were actually napping, while Brick was doing some side exercises, such as using a pair of drifted logs as weights. Dave, for some reason, was sitting close to Sky on a rock that he had decided was okay to be on until the challenge began. Following the arrival of all competitors, Chris announced over the nearby loudspeakers that everyone should follow the wooden pathways and climb onto their team podiums to fasten their straps. After a while, a scoreboard that was attached to a metallic beam rose out of the water, and Chris, wearing a scuba suit, unzipped it to show off his baby blue tux underneath. Chris looked at the teams and said, "Welcome contestants to the Getting to Know You Trivia Game Challenge. Everyone strapped in all nice and snug?" he inquired. Scott muttered, "It's too snug," and attempted tugging on his straps in an attempt to gain some comfort, but to no avail. "It's cutting into my shoulders," he said. Chris smiled as he noticed all the awkward expressions he got. "Yeah, adult to children-sized harnesses will do that for safety reasons," the presenter stated, chuckling slightly. "I'll be asking our players embarrassing personal questions, and I mean majorly humiliating," he said. "If the player I'm talking about hits the poorly wired buzzer and owns to their humiliation before the time runs out, their team gets a point. First team to 5 wins part 1 of today's challenges and gets a good distinct advantage in part 2. When that information was mentioned, the teams looked at one another, and Chris' action seemed strange. Then, they turned to face the host, who was grinning slyly, which alarmed them all. But if no one owns up, this happens. Chris took out a remote control and pressed a button, causing both podiums to plunge into the waters below. The two teams held their breath for what seemed like an eternity, but they began to scream when they noticed a mutant shark approaching the rats, which was Scott in particular. Scott managed to escape his harness but was devoured before he could do so, and he frantically swam towards his team's podium as it stood up. When Scott sat back down and extracted a shark tooth, he felt a searing pain on his ass and cried out in horror, "What the fuck was that?" Like everyone else, Mike was struggling to regain his breath when he exclaimed, "Yeah, there was some kind of two-legged shark monster down there." Chris chuckled evilly and said, "Oh, you mean fawn?" "Yeah, turns out toxic waste can mess with stuff underwater too, who knew?" He illustrated his point with a video of Fong drinking tea on top of an oil drum filled with toxic waste, changing into his current form, which includes arms, legs, and a larger mouth. The host brought out his remote control and was about to press the button when the cast cried out, "No." Anyway, if a team gets dunked, their opponents can steal by guessing which dunkee is guilty. Guess right, you get a point, guess wrong and you get dunked, he continued. Chris smiled, "Good, now that we understand the rules, let's start the game," and then he took a number of cards out of his suit jacket. "Now rats, here is your first question, who did this on the only date they ever had?" he said. A question mark appeared on the screen above the host. Mark, and it animated its fart. All of the competitors laughed at this, but Sam flushed as he reluctantly punched the buzzer, feeling a little shocked because he was wet. "Where did you get that?" Sam said, feeling a little shocked once again. As the screen overhead displayed a pair of shorts with a wet stain on them, Chris remarked, "Next question for the rats, who wet their pants on the first and last day of school?" Mike exclaimed, "Wait, one of you guys a pants wetter?" As the rats looked around, and Joan noticed her castmate Brick flushed and restless, both of them perspiring. Joe commanded, "He who sweats it, wets it, team before Pride Maggot," and Brick responded by pressing the button, receiving a powerful electrical jolt. As the majority of the maggots developed a disgusted expression, the host continued, "Now maggots, I think it's your turn in the spotlight, and your question is, who amongst you all has worn a diaper till they were a preteen?" The screen above displayed an adult diaper. Cameron was holding his head when they heard a moan coming from the bottom. Cameron had responded, "Really, you had to pull that one out, I had no choice being stuck in that bubble," as he clicked the button and slightly shocked himself. With an animation of a stick figure slipping and falling into a porta-potty, Chris said, "Well that sucks, anyways maggots, here is your next question, who has slipped and fallen into a porta-potty?" Before everyone turned to look behind him, he heard a feminine groan. Jasmine then raised her hand and pressed the button. Jasmine huffed, refusing to have that unpleasant event repeated. "That only happened once because of my height and the thing was too cramped." Chris smirked and said, "Okay, it looks like we are tied for now with 2 for 2. Now, let's change things up a bit," he added. "Instead, for the rest of the challenge, just for my amusement, I'm not going to announce the team for the question," he said. His smirk grew as he realized how much more awkward his new twist made his prey. He then asked, "Whose first name is really Beverly," on the spot. The cast members reacted strangely to this, probably asking why the moniker is so embarrassing. As he said, "That's not an embarrassing question," Brick seemed perplexed. "What's wrong with a girl's real name being Beverly?" he inquired. Nearby, a certain silent contestant had started to perspire a little, his eyes were moving quickly to the left and right as he did so. He considered his options in silence, which only made him more anxious. Eventually, after concluding that he did not want to be toxic bait or a shark, he pressed the designated buzzer and received his shock. Everyone was startled out of their reverie by the realization that B had pressed it. Dakota regarded the mute and said, "Really, your name is Beverly?" "Huh, might be the reason why you go by B," before taking out her cosmetics compact to examine herself. He showed an animation of a stick figure vomiting on someone. "I would be fine with getting a verbal response, but I got some info that you're a mute, so I'll let that one slide," Chris said, turning to face B. "Next question, who had gotten vomited on during a cruise?" he asked. When Dave touched the bell and received a shock, he shuddered and remarked, "God, that was just so disgusting, just remembering it was horrible. The shifts and turns of the storm made my mom throw up in her bag and she accidentally threw it at me," Dave added. As the screen above him displayed a sign of the same gender making a kiss-kiss motion, Chris said, "Okay, then both teams are tied again, so here's the next question. Oh, this one is good. Who here had accidentally kissed someone of the same gender?" However, many participants found the response quite unexpected when 3 individuals pressed the buzzer. The remaining campers turned to see who they were and saw Lightning, Dakota, and Naruto blushing wildly, despite the fact that Lightning and Naruto had a green tint. "Wow, didn't see that one coming," the host replied with a chuckle. "So how did you end up in those situations, and what are all you three's excuses?" "Honestly, I was only expecting one person, but didn't expect for 3, Lightning crossed his arms and remarked, "For me, it was my teammate's fault during touch football of tripping me and me falling on top of him for that disgusting moment." He remains angry with his teammate to this day for that humiliating incident. Dakota groaned because those shirts were so adorable and she couldn't wear them for a while after so many washes. "I was out shopping with my girlfriend at the mall with us having our macchiato during our discussions on which designer store is better and someone pushed my best friend on top of me with our drinks spilled on each other. The kiss was very odd on that and we never wanted to speak of that again. Ugh, the drinks took forever to come out of our shirts," she said. Naruto said, disgusted, "I was trying to up-one this douchebag in my early years of school, and some jackass accidentally pushed me into him making it my first kiss, not wanting to ever think about it again." He unconsciously put his hand to his mouth and tried to scratch his tongue to get rid of the phantom feeling of kissing Sasuke, but before he knew it, he turned to the side of the podium to throw up. The mutant maggots groaned and the toxic rats cheered joyfully as Chris grinned and stated, "Well, I was going to ask a few more questions, but it seems that the rats had won this challenge with the multiple points with them earning 2 while the maggots got 1 on that question." Chris cheerfully stated, "Now if you would kindly take off your harnesses and follow me, we will be going on to our next challenge," before pressing a button on his remote control. His podium then separated itself and propellers sprouted out of it, sending the object flying away. Cameron thought as he and the others unbuckled their straps, "Sometimes I wonder how that all got budgeted with his gadgets and whatnot, must have cost a fortune." When Naruto said, "Maybe he stole it," the others laughed as well. Sam accepted the premise, "Yeah, I could imagine that," before the giggles turned into a round of laughing from all others who had listened. As his body lowered back towards the campers, Chris's voice defended his honor by saying, "I did not steal the money. I'll have you know I have a lot of blackmail on a lot of really expensive companies. And just for that, I'm going to make sure your next challenge will be extra tougher than it already is," he said. The kids shivered at the sneer on Chris's face when he said that, and they were truly afraid of the sly gleam in his eyes before he took off again. Perhaps they shouldn't have made such a big deal out of him. The second challenge, Chris paused as Chef threw out a maggot in a diaper, about the size of an average human baby, and a 6-armed rat, about the same size as the maggot, in an equally white diaper. Welcome players to part 2 of today's challenge. It's named the Mad Skills Obstacle Course, he said, gesturing to the lengthy and perilous-looking obstacle course behind him. This will be a relay that begins with a mad dash from the start while you carry the mascots of your teams, he said. Naruto cooed, "Ah, she's not so bad," as he giggled and gently rubbed the maggot beneath her chin. She cooed back, smiling at him. As the rat attempted to attack her face, Joe held it at arm's length and remarked, "Speak for yourself, I'm pretty sure this thing has rabies," with contempt. Chris snapped his fingers and yelled, "Eyes back on me," before clearing his throat. Each of you will all have to run only one section of the course before passing your mascot to the next person in line, and only 6 of you will compete since there are 6 stages, he explained, grinning as the teams began to discuss among themselves who should compete. Too bad you aren't in control of who goes. For the maggots, Amy, Dave, Mike, Sky, Cameron, and Naruto will compete. As for the rats, Brick, Joe, Sammy, Scott, B, and Dakota. Joe smirked and added, "Sweet. Get ready to go down." Chris then cleared his throat and gave the jacket a scowl. Chris smirked as he produced many pairs of glasses with odd green lenses and exclaimed, "I wasn't finished. Not only will you have to run through the courses but you will also have to wear these dizzy goggles." Mike frowned as he put them on and almost tripped over how confusing they were. "Whoa, these things are weird," he remarked. Chris snapped his fingers and Chef shoved the campers to their starting spots, saying, "You all will be put at random stages in the course as I feel like being a bit more ruthless than normal." Not expecting Chris to become irritated by the stolen remark, Naruto cocked an eyebrow and asked, "Is it because of what I said?" "Maybe," Chris said with a huge smile, causing Naruto to moan and other campers to frown at him. Other campers simply encouraged him, telling him it was a joke. The presenter asked Chef, "Wait, does PETA stand for mutant animals as well?" as the cook nodded in confusion. "But enough about this, let's start the challenge," Chris shouted as he fired his starter pistol into the air, only to have a real rat with wings fall from the air and quiver on the ground. When Chris saw that, he groaned and shrugged, thinking, the hippie committee is going to be furious. Chris shouted, "Anyways go," as the campers began the course. Amy shouted, "Better twin first," and pushed her sister down with haste before stumbling off the starting line with her maggot at arm's length from her, drooling green gunk and hissing. Sammy scowled as she carefully handled the rat and trailed behind her sister. She heard her yell as a huge boot slammed down, sending her into the mud. She felt a little relieved as a small laugh escaped her lips, and she leaped over the gap just before her sister recovered. As Amy saw the blonde preppy girl flee with their rat, she cried, "Just go," and gave the shorter male the spewing maggot. Dave shook noticeably and stammered, "T the germs. I can't hold this. Can't you at least clean it off?" Before he shouted and fled with the maggot, Amy pushed it into his arms and yelled in his face, "No. Now go before you cost us the challenge." Fortunately, Sammy had some duct tape to keep it on him. Dave screamed, "You know. Get it off me," as he collapsed to the ground in a fetal position. Dave became pale and fled rapidly, unaffected by the dizzy goggles because his dread of germs overcame them. Amy shrieked, "If you run to Mike he will get it off you. Now go before I make you kiss the damn thing." Even though he was moving a little quicker than they were, he was untouched by the cannons shooting down at him. "Mike, please get it off." Dave cried as he reached Mike before Dakota did. Mike remarked, "Wo, nice running Dave," as Dave reached for his shirt. Dave screamed frantically, "I don't care, get it off me." Mike laughed and removed the maggot from the germaphobe's chest before the boy passed out and fell face first into the muck hole below. Dakota scowled at the hissing rat and whispered, "Here, just go," before the quiet boy bowed and hurried after Mike. As he hopped across the platforms, Mike muttered, "Whoa, this definitely isn't safe," before he gasped for air. "Which is why it is the job for Svetlana," Mike said, gaining a different appearance and accent, with smoother hair, more feminine eye features, and what appeared to be lipstick. As he stood behind Mike, who was now dancing and jumping from platform to platform with the grace of an Olympic gymnast before a wrecking ball crashed into him and sent him flying to the end of his term, the silent child raised an eyebrow in bewilderment. Joe laughed and yelled at Naruto, "Nice job, B. I hope you like the taste of failure." Mike came right away after she fled. Mike took another breath and his features returned to normal. "You, here?" Mike asked nervously as Naruto took the maggot and held it in the crook of his arm before chasing after Joe across the now spinning log. Naruto decided to look into Mike's odd behavior at a later time. Naruto smirked and petted the purring maggot before leaping over Joe, who was clinging to the log after he saw her trip and make the error of clinging to the shifting wood. "What were you saying about failure?" he said. The redhead grinned when he reached the end of the plank and turned to face Sky. "Here you go, she should be asleep so be careful," he said, passing the now snoring maggot to the Kree girl. Before Naruto laughed, Sky exclaimed in amazement, "Wow, that was incredible. You weren't even affected by the log when dizzy." He saw Joe shakily get back up on her feet and added, "We can talk about my talents later, but right now you should run." Oh right," Sky exclaimed, blushing slightly, having been awed by the redhead's ability to balance. I got this," she exclaimed as she resisted a burp and leaped upon big red balls. When Sky discovered she could bounce on the red balls, her blush instantly went away, and she swiftly applied her gymnast talents to move easily from one ball to another. "Good luck trying to copy that," Naruto smirked as he saw Scott's stunned expression before the farmer shrugged it off and jumped anxiously after her. Sky smiled as she gave the tiny kid the giggling maggot, who had woken up and was enjoying the bouncing, saying, "Here Cameron. Go." As he tried to wave it off, the maggot bit his hand for holding it incorrectly, causing him to scream, what do I do with it? I guess I can work with one hand," Cameron whimpered as he grasped the rope with his spare hand. "Perfect, this could work," thought the cunning farmer as he waited for Cameron to collide with one of the bats at the midway point before clearing his throat. Scott grinned as he landed face first on the platform behind the young kid, who was not aware of his presence. As he watched the cadet gasp and whirl back, Scott exclaimed, "Brick! Why haven't you gone yet?" with as much phony eagerness as he could manage. Brick rushed after Cameron with his team's rat, saying, "I am so sorry. I didn't notice you," before snatching up a rope and taking off from the platform. Brick had a really bad day since he soon found himself screaming in a high pitch as he flew into the bat's tip groin first. He then slid over the rope and hit the mud just as Cameron landed on the catcher's mitt, indicating that his team had won. Chris said over his microphone, "Nice try toxic rats, but the mutant maggots are the winners of this challenge." The maggots rejoiced, but the majority of the rats scowled and glared at the cadet, who was lying in the fetal position in agony from the impact. As the rats moaned and left the obstacle course, Chris cried, "Maggots, get yourself cleaned up, while rats, get ready for another elimination." Prior to elimination, Ella inquired naively, feeling a little guilty about not being able to assist with the challenge, "So who should we vote off?" Scott grimaced and grinned inwardly at his slyness, saying, "I say we vote off that useless cadet," adding, "I mean he lost to a boy who has been in a bubble all of his life. Let's vote that picture op chick out." With a bitter expression on her face after losing once more, Joe remarked, "She hardly did anything, and I was amazed she even got past her challenge." As the others nodded and scowled, Sammy murmured, "I don't know, she still did her challenge and she didn't even look at her phone this time." She liked Dakota because she was one of the few females that spoke to her in a normal way. Sam blushed and replied, "Yeah, plus she hot, as in game 10 plus hot, not that it matters though," as everyone else just gave him strange looks. Lightning frowned and remarked, "For once, Lightning agrees with you. I say vote off that loser army dude. I don't want to carry him all throughout our challenges," as the squad essentially reached a consensus. Chris spoke over the speakers, "Attention rats, please come to the campfire for your campfire ceremony," and then the team moaned and frowned as they approached the fire. Campfire rituals, you guys had a great chance to win. It was the Bubble Boy versus the Army Cadet. What went wrong? Brick massaged the back of his neck anxiously as Chris smirked and asked, before an air trumpet blew and cut him off. Brick uttered, I took too long. By the time I noticed Scott Cameron was halfway across and I had no time to recover dash. Since I don't care, this is a rhetorical question." Chris grinned and remarked, "As I previously stated, the recipient of the marshmallow of poisonous loserdom will be thrown into the hurl of humiliation and never come back." As he distributed the marshmallows to the campers, the host declared, "The marshmallows of safety go to Sammy, Scott, Lightning, Ella, Sam, B, and Dakota. All is left is the jacket that bragged before getting held up and passed by our taller redhead," he said, gesturing to Naruto, who was sitting in the audience area and smiling kindly at her. "And then is the Bubble Boy defeated cadet," he added. "The last marshmallow, and the last safe camper is." Everyone already knew the answer, so Amy frowned and said, "Just give it to Joe already. I mean the dumbass lost to a Bubble Boy who hasn't touched land in 16 years. Okay, ruin the tension, but next time the peanut gallery better zip it or they too will be hurled," Chris remarked, letting out a weary sigh as he tossed the final marshmallow to Joe. Joe grinned at the vanquished cadet. As Brick opened his lips to speak, Joe remarked, "Sorry, seems like you just aren't team material." As he threw the cadet into the catapult and threw him off the island, the chef yelled, "Save it, loser, come back when you get good. Finish your training and don't embarrass the army name." What? He wasn't ready for the field. Hell, he'll probably never be if he keeps at it the way he is, the cook remarked as he walked off, smirking and dusting his hands. Looking at the redhead who was chatting with Dakota and some of the other campers, Lightning remarked nervously, "Calm down, Joe. We wouldn't vote you off. I doubt even the great Lightning could beat Naruto."